Okay, so get this right. We are diving into a real mystery today. Yeah, the kind that makes you wonder, like, what's really going on behind the scenes?
Yeah, I love those.
Yeah, so it all starts with Cecilia Sala. You might know her.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Incredible work in Ukraine and Afghanistan.
Yeah, and that podcast, she does stories.
That's the one. But this time, she is the story.
Wow.
So she went to Iran on a journalistic visa, totally legit, everything above board, and then, boom, arrested.
What?
No charges, no explanation, just silence.
That's unsettling, to say the least.
It really is, and I think the silence is almost more telling than anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's been days. And still, nothing officially from Iran about why they're holding her. Not exactly standard procedure.
And that raises some serious questions about their motives.
For sure.
Now, anyone who follows Cecilia's work knows this woman, she's meticulous, always on top of things. So when she went radio silent, missed a deadline for her podcast, her colleagues knew something was up. Big time.
Yeah, you don't get that kind of reputation by being flaky. It really speaks to her professionalism that this, set off alarm bells immediately.
Totally. Okay, so let's lay out the timeline here, because even the sequence of events, it's full of these little details that make you go, huh. So Cecilia arrives in Iran December 12th. It's an 8-day trip, journalistic visa in hand, ready to gather material for stories, right? She even had a fixer from the Italian embassy with her.
Oh, wow. So she wasn't exactly, going rogue or anything.
No, not at all. And at first, everything seems fine, right? I mean, she even produces 3 episodes of her podcast from Iran. But then December 19th rolls around, and things take a turn. She misses that podcast deadline. All communication goes dark. Poof. Vanished.
And that's when, as you said, the alarm bells start ringing, yeah.
That's right. Because, again, this is so not Cecilia.
So then what happens?
Right. So by December 20th, it's clear something's very wrong. She doesn't board her flight back to Italy. And that's when the Italian Foreign Ministry and security services get involved. I mean, full-blown missing person situation here.
Wow. And then?
Then later that same day, December 20th, she gets this brief phone call to her mother.
Oh, so at least they know she's alive.
Right. But it's not exactly reassuring.
How so?
She just says, I've been arrested.
Yeah.
That gives no details. And it sounds like she's reading a prepared statement, almost certainly, under duress.
That's chilling.
It is. So they know she's alive, but no charges, no explanation, just, I've been arrested. Then, as if things couldn't get weirder, they find out she's being held in Evin Prison.
Ah, Evin. That's not good. Not good at all.
Yeah, for those who don't know, Evin Prison, it's, infamous is an understatement.
It's where the regime sends its political prisoners, anyone who speaks out against them, to be held there. You don't even know what you're accused of. I mean, it's terrifying.
Absolutely. It's like being thrown into a black hole. And then, get this, they keep her in solitary confinement for 8 days before allowing another phone call with family.
Solitary confinement. It's just brutal. They use it to break people, It's psychological torture, plain and simple.
And we have to remember, any contact she has with the outside world is being carefully controlled by her captors.
It makes you wonder what they're trying to achieve with all this, right?
Exactly. And even the tiny details from that second phone call are, strange.
Like what?
She mentioned getting chicken and rice for Christmas.
Wow.
It's like this tiny window into her life in prison, and you can't help but analyze every word.
That's all you have to go on, I guess.
Right. And then it's not until December 27th that the Italian ambassador to Iran is finally allowed to visit, Paola Amedei.
And what do they find out?
Well, according to the ambassador, Cecilia's physically okay, but obviously under a lot of mental strain.
Understandably. I mean, what she's been through, it's a lot.
For sure. But here's the kicker. The news of her arrest doesn't even become public until December 28th. So you have this prominent journalist arrested without charges, held incommunicado in this notorious prison. And the whole world's left wondering what on earth is happening.
The lack of transparency it's really worrying. And it's not just about Cecilia. It's about, the bigger picture. What does this say about press freedom, about how countries deal with each other?
Absolutely. And it's just as things couldn't get more complicated, there's this other twist.
Okay, lay it on me.
Something happens a few days before Cecilia's arrest. Adds a whole other layer of intrigue. So a Swiss-Iranian citizen, Mohammed Abedini Najafabadi, he's arrested in Italy on a U.S. warrant.
What was he doing in Italy?
That's part of the mystery. But the U.S. is accusing him of providing drone technology to Iran's Revolutionary Guard.
Whoa. So he was like, helping Iran.
Potentially. They believe he's linked to an attack that killed 3 U.S. soldiers.
Okay, wait. So you have an Italian journalist arrested in Iran, and then a Swiss Iranian, possibly connected to Iran, arrested in Italy. Just days before. That can't be a coincidence.
Right. It's like, what are the odds? And some people are speculating that Cecilia's arrest, it might be retaliation by Iran because of Abedini's detention.
Tit for tat.
It's called hostage diplomacy, and it's sadly more common than you'd think.
Countries use people like bargaining chips to get what they want in political negotiations.
It's awful, but yeah, that's one theory. And
Yeah.
if it's true, it puts the Italian government in an impossible position.
Yeah. Because on the one hand, they need to be strong, right? Demand Cecilia's release.
Yeah.
But if they push too hard, they could make things worse for her.
It's such a delicate balancing act. And speaking of the Italian government, they've been saying some interesting things about Cecilia's conditions and Evin.
Like what?
Well, the Italian foreign minister, Antonio Tajani, he confirmed that she's in solitary confinement, but he also said that her conditions are, quote, better than those experienced by Alessia Paperno in 2022.
Alessia Paperno, that other Italian who was detained in Evin.
Right. Exactly. It's almost like they're trying to reassure people, but also acknowledge that, yeah, Evin is brutal.
I think they're trying to send a message without saying too much. You know, it could backfire.
It's this high-stakes game of diplomatic chess. And meanwhile, Cecilia's caught in the middle.
And it's a reminder, behind all the politics and the headlines, there's a real person whose life has been completely upended.
Yeah. It's like she went to do her job and accidentally walked right into this, like, geopolitical minefield.
Ugh, it's crazy, right?
And, you know, the fact that she was there to report on, like, the issues that the Iranian regime is most sensitive about, you know, women's rights, calls for social change, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it makes it even more complicated.
For sure.
Speaking of complicated, have you seen the public reaction to all this?
Oh, yeah. It's all over the place.
It's like this weird mix of, you know, genuine concern for Cecilia and then not so much.
Yeah.
Right. Like, on the one hand, you have this amazing outpouring of support from journalists, press freedom groups all over the world. They're condemning her arrest, demanding her release. It's powerful, you know, like seeing that solidarity.
But then there's the flip side.
Yeah.
The people who are, like, judging her, questioning why she was even in Iran in the first place, blaming her almost.
It's a shame. It's like, even with someone's freedom at stake, you still get those people. You know?
It's really disheartening. And it kind of takes away from the real issue here, which is Cecilia's safety and her right to, you know, do her job.
Totally. Like they're missing the forest for the trees.
And it's so easy to get caught up in all that online noise, but let's bring it back to what matters here. What about the Italian government's response? It's like they're walking this tightrope.
Oh, for sure. Trying to get her back, but also not make things worse.
Yeah.
Every move they make, the whole world's watching.
Absolutely. They need to be firm, show that they're serious about getting her released, but also they don't want to provoke Iran. Who knows what could happen to Cecilia then?
It's like realpolitik in action, but with, like, real human consequences.
And they've been emphasizing this, you know, diplomatic approach, which makes sense. Prime Minister Meloni even said publicly, you know, that they are committed to bringing her home. But they're also urging the media to be careful, you know?
Yeah, I think that's a smart move. Too much media attention, it can actually hinder the negotiations that are happening behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Sometimes quiet diplomacy works better than, like, making a big show of it.
And there's this other subtle detail in their messaging that I thought was interesting. They keep mentioning how Cecilia's conditions are better than those experienced by Alessia Paperno.
Right, the other Italian who was held in Evin last year.
Yeah, it's almost like they're acknowledging that Evin is awful, but without directly criticizing Iran.
Yeah, very clever.
Okay, but zoom out with me for a minute. Think bigger picture. What does Cecilia's arrest tell us about press freedom? Not just in Iran, but globally.
Well, I think it's a huge wake-up call. Journalists are becoming targets, especially in places where the government doesn't want certain stories told.
Right. And cases like this, they have a chilling effect. Other journalists might think twice before reporting on something sensitive.
Because they could end up like Cecilia.
It's scary. And once you start silencing journalists, that's it. There's no hope for a free society, is there?
It's a slippery slope. And what about international relations? I mean, this isn't going to help the already strained relationship between Iran and the West, is it?
It's tough to say.
Yeah, because if Iran is holding Cecilia hostage to try and force Italy or the U.S. to do what they want.
Which is what it looks like.
Right, it sets a bad precedent. Like now, other countries might try the same thing.
And the timing of all this is just, it's wild. I mean, Iran's already dealing with protests, international scrutiny over its nuclear program.
It's like a powder keg just waiting to explode.
Yeah, it's really hard to say how this will all play out. But one thing's for sure, the whole world's watching.
Oh yeah, the outcome of Cecilia's case. It could have some major consequences.
Okay, I know we've thrown a lot of information at you. This
It-
is a lot to take in.
It really is.
A lot of unknowns here, and things are changing all the time.
Yeah, so important to stay informed. But also, think critically about what you're reading and hearing. There are a lot of theories out there, and it's easy to get caught up in the hype.
Okay, so let's take a second. Just recap what we know for sure. Cecilia Sala, a respected journalist from Italy, she's arrested in Iran, December 19th, while working on her podcast.
She had a valid journalist visa, and to this day, there's been no official reason given for why they're holding her.
And she's being held in Evin Prison, which, as we've discussed, has a pretty horrible reputation.
Yeah, and her arrest happens just a few days after that Swiss-Iranian guy, Abedini, is arrested in Italy, which is, making a lot of people wonder if this is some kind of tit-for-tat situation.
Hostage diplomacy.
Exactly.
The Italian government is working to get her released, but they're being very careful.
Trying to work things out quietly.
And public reaction. Well, it's been a mixed bag. Some are genuinely concerned, demanding her release. And then you have others who are more interested in criticizing her than actually helping.
It's a shame, really.
It's messy, and it highlights how fragile press freedom is, not just in Iran, but everywhere, and how dangerous it can be for journalists to report on sensitive topics.
And it shows just how complex things are, geopolitically speaking. I mean, what seems like an isolated event can turn into an international incident pretty quickly.
And this story is still developing. Staying informed is key. But before we move on to the last part of this deep dive, I want to bring you, the listener, into this. What are you thinking? What stands out to you? What questions are on your mind?
Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about Cecilia Sala or even Iran. It's about the things that matter most. A free press, the rule of law, basic human rights.
And these are things that affect all of us.
Absolutely. We've got to remember we all have a responsibility to stand up for what's right and to hold those in power accountable.
It's like we're all just kind of waiting, holding our breath to see what happens next.
I know, it's hard not to get caught up in the, what ifs.
Right. And while we wait for news about Cecilia, it's worth, exploring how this could all play out, right?
Yeah.
What are the different possibilities here?
Totally. Yeah. It's like we're piecing together this puzzle, but some of the pieces are still missing.
Okay, so let's, brainstorm here. What's the best case scenario?
Well, obviously the best case is Cecilia gets released swiftly. No strings attached.
Yes. That would be amazing.
I mean, can you imagine the relief? Not just for her and her family, but for everyone who's been following this.
It would be huge.
Yeah.
And what would it say about Iran?
I think it would show that they're willing to work with the West.
Yeah.
De-escalate things.
And for press freedom.
Oh, it would be a major win. Show that journalism can, thrive, even in the face of, authoritarian regimes.
I love that. A win-win. But realistically.
Realistically, yeah, I'm not so sure that's the most likely outcome.
Right. So what else could happen?
Well, as we talked about, Iran could use her as leverage.
Ugh, that hostage diplomacy thing.
Right. Try to tie her release to, getting Abedini extradited back to Iran.
So she becomes, a bargaining chip.
Yeah, which puts Italy in a really tough spot. Do they give in, compromise their values to, maybe save Cecilia? Or do they hold firm and risk making things worse for her?
It's a horrible choice to have to make.
It really is. And then there's another possibility. What if Iran decides to formally charge her with something?
Even if it's totally made up.
Exactly. Espionage. Spreading propaganda, whatever they can come up with.
But even if she goes on trial, there's no guarantee it'll be fair.
Right. The Iranian legal system.
Yeah.
Not exactly known for its transparency. It could be a show trial,
Yeah.
The verdict already decided before it even begins.
That's terrifying. And then there's, the scenario I don't even want to think about. What if she's just stuck there indefinitely?
Yeah, that's the worst case scenario, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's a reminder of how brutal these regimes can be. They disregard human rights completely.
It would be heartbreaking for Cecilia, her family, and honestly for anyone who believes in justice.
I think we have to prepare ourselves for the fact that this could be a long, drawn-out process. But amidst all this uncertainty, there's one thing we can't lose sight of.
What's that?
This isn't just about one person or one country. This is about something much bigger.
The fight for freedom.
Exactly. Freedom of the press, the rule of law, the basic right to, live without fear.
So while we wait and we hope, what can we as individuals actually do to make a difference?
Well, we got to keep talking about this. Keep it in the headline.
Don't let people forget.
Right. And support organizations that are fighting for press freedom. Reporters Without Borders, for example, they're doing amazing work.
And we can contact our
Yeah.
elected officials, tell them to put pressure on Iran because every voice matters.
And I think the most important thing is we can't get cynical or apathetic. We have to believe that even small acts of, solidarity, they can make a difference.
This has been a heavy one, no doubt.
It really has.
We've covered a lot, a complex situation with a lot of unknowns.
Yeah. We've been reminded of, how vital journalism is, how important a free press is, and just how fragile human rights are when you're dealing with authoritarian governments.
And we've seen how people's lives get caught up in these political games. It's a reminder that we can't take our freedoms for granted and that we all have to play a part in protecting them.
We'll keep following this story closely, and we'll let you know as things develop. Until then, stay informed, stay engaged, and don't lose hope.
This is The Deep Dive, signing off.